Hello everyone, welcome back to my show, The Interview. I'm Susan Lee MacDonald. They say that life is full of agony, despair, and suffering. But the teachings of Buddha are here to help us see who we are and relieve us of our suffering. 2,600 years ago, Buddha came to tell so many people about how to escape this life. And I think that we have so much to learn from our guest today. Today we're going to meet, in time for Buddha's birthday, the amazing Hungarian monk Chong Am Sunim. He is going to tell us all about where Buddhism is headed, and it's headed apparently to Hungary too. So we'll find out all about Hungary and the Buddhist movement there today here on The Interview. The blue-eyed monk Chong Am Sunim left his homeland to come to Korea to learn the teachings of Buddha. In 1993, he realized his calling from the teachings of Soo Am Sunim, also known as the Dharma of Korea, and he boarded a plane to Korea. Three years later, he was appointed a monk, and he focused on practice and meditations for 6 years. Then, in 2000, he returned to his native country of Hungary to share his knowledge and wisdom regarding Korean Buddhism. He is spreading Korean Buddhism to foreigners as the founder and chief monk at Wonggwangsa, the first Korean Buddhist temple ever to be built in Europe.
Hello, welcome to Hwagyesa. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah.
I'm so glad to finally be here at Hwagyesa, and I'm wondering if there's something special that I need to do to kind of, keep the honor and pay respects to, the folks being here.
Please proceed. And we bow in the center line. Do that with me as we cross. And I open the door for you. Here you go. Yeah. So Susan, let me show you the traditional form of respect, which is 3 bows before the altar. So we say Puchani Maphe Sambe, but originally it means 1 bow, the Buddha, the other, the Dharma, and then the Sangha. So the teacher, the teaching, and the students' assembly. So let me show you the full form. It starts with a standing bow, then the first, and after the third there is a small finishing bow, and it stops with a standing bow as well. You may or may not use your hands depending on what kind of knees and physical problems you may or may not have, but it doesn't add or subtract from the value of the bows. What's most important is the mind that you have during the bows. So when you bow, the meaning of it is that your person, yourself, becomes much smaller and less significant than the Buddha, that is your Buddha nature. So this move means that you actually raise the Buddha above yourself.
So you're humbling yourself before
Exactly.
the Buddha.
In fact, if you do this right, yourself disappears and only the Buddha remains. So why don't we try this together? Okay. And the small one, very good. This bow is really important because, like I said, if not just your body bows, but your mind bows, the result is what we call hashim. Hashim, low mind or humble mind. This humility is really important, and not just before teachers and seniors. It's really important before your own Buddha nature so that none of your karma could become stronger. None of our arrogance would think faster and more than our Buddha nature would perceive or could digest. It's really important. This humility is not some kind of moral or social attitude. It translates into that as well. But primarily you become humble because you see that there's something much, much greater than you ever thought of as yourself. Ultimately, that's your true self. But it's not something that you ever conceived of so far. So our false notion of self, which is the ego, has to disappear by going lower and lower and lower. And our true notion of our true self, which is our Buddha nature, has to go higher and higher and higher. And that's what the bows do. And there's a lot of wonderful side effects like clearing up your energy path, giving you good breathing, etc., etc. But it's not as important.
All secondary then.
It's all secondary. The mental aspect is primary. Because you take your mind with you when you leave, but you leave your body here.
Yes.
Okay? Ultimately, that's what happens to all of us.
I shall free my mind from greed, anger, and ignorance, and replace them with the clean Buddhist precepts, the tranquil state of samadhi and bright wisdom.
So, Sunim, I want to ask you about the first European Korean Buddhist temple that you've set up in your home country, Hungary. How did that come about, and especially in a country with so many Catholics?
You know, when you train yourself in Korea, among other monks, and your teacher teaches you something really wonderful, you wonder how you could put that into the West and how you could help other people with that. So my intention with that was, in fact, manifold. One is to have a home for Sunims, because if monks and nuns should live in some other places than temples, then it's really difficult. Then if we live together, we practice together, then that energy can attract a lot of people who can benefit from that. We really do not try to build a museum or a tourist site, etc., etc. It's nothing external. But once we construct a temple, we want it to be in a good place. We want it to look authentic, and we want to use it in the fullest original sense. And then
so the traditional buildings that look very similar to this, we can find in Hungary too?
Yes, you can.
Wow.
You should see when Koreans visit, some of them have their nunmul, their tears coming out, because it really does look Korean. They really feel like back home, although it's 8,000 kilometers away.
Wow. And in Hungary, of all places.
It is. In the mountains, traditional style, practicing chamsan. So that is very rare.
Wow. That's so interesting. So tell me what the meaning of Won Gwangsa is.
Won Kwang means original light, and Sa is temple. So Won, original, Kwang is light. We all have our Buddha nature. We all have our potential for enlightenment. That's our original light inside of us.
Okay.
And if we just clear our karma just a little bit, we can bring this original light out. In other words, we can wake up, we can get enlightenment.
And how did you come up with that name? Was that something that your master or teacher had said that you should do, or did it come spontaneously?
No, actually, Soo Am Sunim never wanted anybody to follow his words or his practice form or the way he moved or walked or talked. He never wanted that. That's why he was a great teacher. That name also came up spontaneously after some search, and when the land was found, soon after that the name was found. So I don't know how, I was having this question, what kind of name should we give to the temple? And then one moment during a retreat, a 90-day retreat, it just came and it got stuck. It's there.
Interesting. Now, how did you find this location?
Well, first of all, I should start with my Unsa Sunim, Sungsan Sunim, how he related to this. He said, you can practice in any place, doesn't matter. So that's number one important. You can practice anywhere. But once you build a temple, you should find the correct location when nature's energy supports human energy. So he said, don't learn too much from books. Go and visit temples in Korea and see why they are there. I did exactly that. I brought his teaching and my experience together, and we were looking for this place for over 1 year. And we had several locations to look at. Then on the way out, I noticed this valley, And I went to the center of this valley, looked around, and I said, wow. Then a little meditation, then it became very clear. Then I brought out the Sangha,
Wow.
so that they could see it and feel it. And we said, yes, we try.
What are some of the challenges that you faced in having your own temple that you've been kind of operating and starting from the beginning?
You see, let's start again with the spiritual challenges. Just like before we talked about spiritual capital. The spiritual challenge is how to keep your mind clear always, all the time. No matter what kind of letter you open from the local government, or what your lawyer tells you as the next hurdle, or what donations came in and did not come in, things like that. So this is not just a construction project. In other words, you have to have your inside temple intact so that you could build the outside temple.
And when you say the inside temple, you're actually meaning just where my heart is.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that inside temple is clean if you can refrain from producing dualistic thoughts and emotions. Otherwise, your own opinions, your own reactions, your own views contaminate the mind space, or at least fill up the mind space that you should use to help others, to stay clear, and to reflect things and reflect relationships as they are.
So in other words, let's say for most lay people like myself, if I encounter a challenging situation, the temptation to get frustrated, get angry, get upset, when things don't go in a way that I feel is best, then that internal balance is kind of broken, and then it takes me some time to kind of regroup, rebalance myself, and then act instead of reacting. Is that kind of what you mean by
Pretty
holding?
much. But let's go one layer deeper.
Okay.
For most people, and I don't distinguish between Sunims and lay people in that regard, for most people, this balance has never been put on a strong foundation. So it's been put on some education, on some material well-being, on some appreciation from your friends, etc. But when this comes to test and you're in a deep crisis, or you just have to open a bad letter, or you get a bad phone call because somebody hammers you or threatens the project, or some legal hurdles come up, then how strong is your foundation? Is it quicksand or rock? So if you can put your mind in a non-dualistic foundation, then it's closer to a rock than quicksand. And then life tests you, how really strong your clarity is, how strong your compassion is, how strong your wisdom is. And these tests actually prove whether you have an inside temple in your heart or not. You cannot build an outside temple only. You have to have one inside. And when you do, then the thing happens outside.
Hwagyesa International Zen Temple is situated in the heart of the Carpathian Basin in Hungary, where the Carpathian Mountains encircle the fertile plains of the Danube and Tisza rivers. Chong Am Sunim oversaw the entire construction project, from purchasing the land to the actual construction to build this temple, the first of its kind in Europe. After 5 long years of hard work, Hwagyesa finally opened its doors and is propagating the teachings of Korean Buddhism.
How did you decide to become a Buddhist monk? We know that it's not typical for most people, whether they're Eastern, Western, Asian, African, American, to become a monk. And I'm curious, what was the impetus for you to become one?
You know, that impetus was just one big surprise. It was a thought, an unprecedented and very clear thought echoing in my consciousness in 1992, spring, when I graduated from university. Soo Am Sunim visited Budapest the year before, and we connected really at that time, in 91 April. He had a Dharma talk with questions and answers, and a meditation workshop the following day. And I was present at both, asked him questions, personally, and then he answered. So that kind of sealed my affiliation to his teaching.
Now, had you ever read anything about Buddha before, or were you religious or spiritual in some way prior to that?
No, actually, I read precious little about Buddhism. I knew about Tibetan Buddhism, like the Nyingma version, the old school. And I did some yoga prior to that. But that sentence in 1992 April was just one thing. After I finished a class at the high school, looked at the empty courtyard and the blue sky and the green trees, how wonderful it would be to become monk this lifetime.
So you had a question in your mind?
No,
kind of...
that's the point. That's why it was such a surprise.
Huh.
I didn't have to think about what to do with my life. I was graduating from a top-notch university in Budapest, 2 majors, going on for postgrad, you know, course for becoming a pro. And I had a golden life. I lived in my own room. I had no immediate difficulties. I had tasks, but no crises. So why think about that? I was a happy lay Buddhist. With hair, with a car,
with hair.
with an apartment, with a job soon come. Okay, so there was no reason to think about that, but it came. Why? Because it was time for that to came. So I finished my postgrad, you know, thesis, etc. And then I actually wanted to try what it means to become monk. And in our tradition, that means that you sit 90-day retreats. And I sat one, and then it became sealed. That was 2 years later. In '94, I set a 90-day retreat in the West. And that was when I said to myself, this is my life. I want to do this.
Wow.
So then I asked permission from Soo Am Sunim. Yeah. Well, crystal clear. Crystal clear, as much as you can make that clear at age 28. You can. But what comes as part of your monk life, you never know.
But then there must have been a lot of other things that happened in that time that you had to just kind of get rid of. You had to get rid of your room. You had to get rid of all the earthly kind of material belongings.
Well, I could leave behind my home because I never lived independently. In the 80s, you know, most Hungarian youth lived in their parents' house, which I did. I didn't have to worry about schools because I finished all of them. I didn't start a new life. I was never married. I didn't have at that time a girlfriend, so no problem.
Wow.
So
wow.
that was already sealed by the time I took precepts. All of that got cleared, and only these days do students take loans. In my time, people didn't have to take loans to finish higher education, so I was debt free.
Wow. How did your parents react to your decision to becoming a Buddhist monk? I imagine that no one in your family previously was Buddhist?
No. At least not this lifetime.
Yes.
I think my mom had a little touch of Asia. Maybe my dad too. Anyway.
And how did they react to your news of telling them that you were choosing this for yourself?
First of all, they just couldn't believe it. They just couldn't believe that their son,
an only son, yes.
an only son, fresh off university, got just grabbed by something unknown. So, as I said, I had been living in my parents' house prior to my going to America, and that was like almost 4 years, and I was practicing Zen. So my dad used to ask me, he was a top-notch scientist, medical professor, why are you practicing this thing which even I don't understand? So I said, Dad, you know, I explained this to you so many times. We always got into an argument, and I really don't want to argue with you anymore. Just please watch my life, and if you see that I make a mistake, let me know, and I'll try to correct it. So his argument ceased, completely stopped.
Wow.
But when I became monk, everything turned dark for him because that was not the future he imagined for his only son.
Right, he's thinking that you would become very successful in society or whatever work you're doing. And nice wife, couple of kids, etc. So that was in store for him, he thought. Now, what's important is that in 1997, they visited Korea. They met Soo Am Sunim. My dad had a half-an-hour conversation with him in English while my mom was looking at it and listening. And they came out totally satisfied with what they heard and saw, and I took 2 weeks to take them around Korea. So they saw that their son was not entering some crazy cult or some weird religion. Their son is actually happy and respected and successful to the necessary, you know, extent, so that they would feel that I'm integrated here. But when I went home in 2000, my dad just still couldn't believe, you know, that this is going on for the last 7 years or so. Did he think it was a phase or something?
Yeah, he thought it was a phase.
Maybe just for a few years.
And then I said, Dad, I became a teacher. He said, yeah, but why can't you get a wife for yourself? You know? I said, Dad, I could get a wife. I have all the instruments for it. But I don't intend to. And he said, why? And then I said to him, Dad, there's enough kids on the earth, and I love kids and they love me, but I don't want mine. I'm interested in not a quantity increase, but a quality increase. So this kind of stuff. And then after a couple of years, my mom was able to say, if you're happy, I'm happy. But my dad passed away 12 years ago, and
I'm sorry.
Until his dying day, he couldn't really accept that I did this. That's all right, and I had heart-to-heart conversations with him about it. But what he had to understand that when sons become independent, they choose their own direction.
Sure.
And I can't live his life.
Right.
I can live only my life.
Right. Now, has she come to visit you in your temple, or does
Many
she maybe?
times.
Has she decided to maybe live there with you?
No.
No.
She lives in her own private space in Budapest, next to the old family apartment, which is good for her and good for me and good for the temple. It's great. What she came to respect is our tradition, partly because I never wanted her to follow it.
Why not?
Because it would be the same intrusion into her life as my father's wish was into my life. So I don't want to make people dependent on my decisions. I help them if necessary, but I will not tell my mom what to do. If she asks, I answer. If she requests, I fulfill that request to the best of my abilities. But I'll never tell her, Mom, I'm a Buddhist monk, so you should practice Buddhism too. That's a no. I degrade the whole thing before her eyes. No way.
Do you know of any time in that period where you thought to yourself, I'm not sure if I made the right decision?
That never came in Korea. Because for 6 years you're embedded in this temple environment, you're kind of nurtured like a new baby in the womb. And when your teacher makes you a teacher, which happened in 1999, then there's no further doubt, because your teacher kind of seals it and says, okay, go do your job. After all, that's what you came here for. You have a kind of natural kind of talent for this. So why don't you teach what you learned and what you think of as precious? So I never really had that doubt whether I made the right decision, but it doesn't mean that I didn't have difficulties. Of course, we are human beings, we are in this human body, difficulties come, sometimes very nice and beautiful difficulties, sometimes very ugly and impersonal difficulties. Nonetheless, they are there. So if they don't kill you, they make you stronger. But there was never a doubt whether I did the right thing or not.
What it was about Buddhism that appealed to you in the early stages that made you decide that you wanted to become a monk?
So when they say, you follow the path, you get enlightenment. That's all I needed. Whenever that happens, whenever that enlightenment happens, I don't care. But as long as we follow the path to the same direction, someday it will happen. So it teaches people to be totally one with the world, integrated into society in their various capacities, but spiritually independent. I love it. I love it. To the present day, this is the best pattern and the best framework I can imagine for anything spiritual.
You mentioned the importance of the independence that you feel with this path. And of the many, many things that Buddha has said, is there something in particular that you can say is one of the most moving things for you that he said?
Just before he died, he said that, monks, this world is on fire. Strive endlessly.
Strive endlessly?
Yeah.
Strive for what?
Strive for your own awakening, because you have very limited time. He wasn't threatening people, he was warning people that this life is very short, very transient, and this world is on fire means it's impermanent. Strive endlessly means do something with your consciousness, because if you're reborn with the same kind of mind as what you brought here, that's a zero. You didn't do anything except consume food, energy, and sunshine and rain. But what do you do with your mind? What do you do with your consciousness? So strive endlessly means never think it's over. Never think that you got the great awakening, because that kind of notion poisons you. Awakening wakes you up. But if you react to it intellectually that I got it, that poisons you and takes you to hell. So strive endlessly means just that.
So is he also referring to just a conscious decision to elevate the consciousness? So to not just be content with the externals, or just even a nice life, but to truly kind of work on oneself and be aware, to truly be self-aware. Is that what he's meaning?
So you look at your own character, you find a lot of things you don't want to face.
Yes.
But the first thing you do is face them, see them for what they are. Then you stop feeling so good and bad about yourself. Then you see how your habits are formed. and you can see these entry points and exit points, how you can change these habits and turn yourself into something else. The choice is always ours, except sometimes we don't see these choices. And then we blame something or someone else. She made me do this, he made me do this, it made me, whatever. So we love to blame the world, the exterior and society, because we became what we became, negative. Nobody did these things to you. You invited them to yourself. You made conscious decisions to become the person you are.
Right.
So if we regain this kind of spiritual independence, because that's where this question started, then we stop blaming others. We stop blaming the world. We see cause and effect. How the world and us interact. How we use other people's decisions to create the character that we are. So it's not us as a single person, as an individual creating everything, because that's another wrong view. But it's a complete interaction with the world that creates this moment for us. And we should see our part, what is our part in it, what we do, what we are responsible for, and that gives us the spiritual independence, which results in more complete and harmonious cooperation with the world and other people.
Great.
With many doubts and questions overwhelming him, a blue-eyed young man met a Korean Buddhist monk one fateful day and realized his calling. He followed the monk halfway across the world to learn more about Korean Buddhism. 3 years later, the young man became a monk and was given the name Chong. Chong Am Sunim has been spreading the teachings and wisdom of Korean Buddhism by following his teacher's footsteps and traveling all over Europe, including Austria, Slovakia, and the Czech Republic. His top priority, just as it was for his teacher Soo Am Sunim, is to teach his audience how to look into their own minds.
So, Sunim, can you tell me a little bit about this place? I'm seeing these various statues of sorts.
This is a memorial garden. This is Kobong Sunim's Chumotap.
Okay.
And he was Soo Am Sunim's Unsa Sunim.
What does that mean?
Father monk or principal teacher.
Okay. I'd love to learn a little bit more about your teacher, Soo Am Sunim. What type of person was he?
He was a great and really, for us, fully enlightened Zen master with a lot of strength and humor. He was really hard on himself, practicing. He always required himself to practice more than others. And for us, he exhibited all the features of a great master whom we could follow. And I feel very fortunate that I could meet him, and I owe him everything.
And with Soo Am Sunim, you were with him for how long?
I should say I met him in Hungary in 1991, and until I last saw him in this life in 2003, there was no single year that either I wouldn't meet him or attend a retreat where he was present. But the principal time when we were under the same roof was right here at Hwagyesa between 1994 and 2000. So those 6 years were the most important and most formative 6 years, and we knew it. Everybody who stayed with him, because he stopped traveling in 93, 94, especially to the West. He had a couple of more trips to Hong Kong and Singapore, but he essentially stopped traveling in 93, 94. Then he started to come up to the Zen Center, to the 4th floor of the Teja Kwanjom building, and gave us daily Kongan teaching. Now that's priceless.
I'd love to see a little bit more of these kind of monuments. Now, is this a typical? I don't think I've seen one that has so many kind of circular discs.
Me neither.
Before.
Look, Susan, this is the most unconventional chumotap or saritap that you could ever think of. You know. So this is the symbol of universal substance, which you attain when your lotus of enlightenment. You see that petaled lotus before that? Underneath. So when that opens, you attain substance, our true self. So sometimes it's held by lions, like the effort on Kobongsin, but here it's lotuses. And below that, the kind of three levels, the three major levels of body, speech, and mind. That's how I interpret it. But many people can have various other ideas about it. But frankly enough, never a pagoda like this, with the circles and this kind of very smooth and round, octagonal shape, 1 and 2. So I really wouldn't like to go into it too much, what it may mean. I just thank you, Khun Sunim. I bow to it. And that's it. Thank you so much for your hard work and practice, sir, and your teaching. Thank you.
You know, I'm looking at this amazing monument here, and I'm curious if you can explain to me a little bit about this, because you mentioned the don't know and don't think, and I see these inscriptions right here. Only don't know.
Only doing it, yeah.
Yeah.
I can't explain to you. Not because I cannot read it. I can't read it, but that's not the reason why I cannot explain to you. Can you see your own eyes?
Only in a mirror.
That's not your eyes. It's this physical object. That's not your seeing. Can you hear your ears?
No, I don't think so.
By thinking, can you get to your true self?
Yeah.
Now, I would like you to perceive the sounds. When you perceive the sounds, there is no thinking, and ultimately you and this world can become one if you perceive the sounds deep enough. That's what Kwan Se means, perceive the sound of the world. So what do you hear right now?
Aside from the truck coming up the road?
That's perfectly enough.
Yeah.
So you hear a vehicle coming up. What else?
The birds.
Exactly. The movement of the feet on the gravel. So if you perfectly attain the sound, you also attain where the sound comes from. And as the Chinese wisdom used to say, you find the bull on which you are already sitting. No one can explain don't know, but you can perceive it, because that's what perceives. So if you guide the sounds back to the source of hearing, you attain. You guide vision back to the place of seeing, you attain.
When you were with Soo Am Sunim, I imagine that you had many, many questions.
Yeah.
And how could you describe your relationship to Soo Am Sunim? In what regard do you hold him?
Well, it's like small duck following a big duck. You know, when you are spiritually born, then your little eggshell of yourself is cracks, and you see this first big thing right next to you, which is the big duck. And then big duck follows small duck. That's it. That was the relationship. Look, Soo Am Sunim never let anybody become, quote unquote, his friend. He had spiritual friends, other Korean monks, but I'm talking about the students, not even his elder students. Nobody was buddying with him. So nobody was running into his room for tea or personal favors. When they had a problem, they saw him personally. When they had some big changes, they saw him personally. When they just wanted to share something deep or have some personal question, also saw him personally. Therefore, I saw him average once or twice every year, one-on-one, outside of the public, teaching situation, for longer than 10-15 minutes. But those conversations were pivotal. They were extremely and utmost importance, So meeting him was nothing that you can 100% put into words, but the presence of a great teacher gives you a lot of security and challenge at the same time, direction and questions at the same time, and it shakes your karma 100%. So why you can trust a teacher, because everything that you have as a homework appears, and the presence of the teacher and the question answers, they help you solve it. The teacher doesn't take away your homework, doesn't take away your karma, doesn't solve your karma for you, but his presence and his clear mind, his compassionate, wise and strong, powerful mind helps you solve your karma, helps keep your direction clear. And because of that, I'm eternally grateful to him.
How did he come up with the name Chong Am Sunim?
Well, just like with any other Dharma name, he looks at the person and sees the potential and the homework at the same time.
And what does that mean?
So Malgul Chongchanunancha means clear eyes.
And is it because you have blue eyes that he gave you
Well,
that?
the Malgul, can be blue if it's Paran Chongcha, but if it's Malgul Chongcha, then it's clear. So if I don't do my job, it's just blue. But if I do my job, it becomes clear. So I think he just spurred me to that direction to see clearly. But if there's another Dharma name, then you can get to the same principle, the same substance through some other Dharma meaning. But he gave me this because that's my path. See clearly. Never let your vision, your perception be clouded by anything, anyone, anytime. And he made one calligraphy for me, which is mu-wi, don't move.
Don't move.
Yeah, so that's non-action original, that's the Wu Wei in Chinese, it's non-action. But what that means, your mind should never move.
Is that possible?
Of course.
That your mind doesn't move?
Yes, it's possible. But you think, it moves. Not thinking, doesn't move.
So if I just decide not to think, well, then we couldn't do this interview.
Listen.
Maybe I can't become a Buddhist because I need to be able to think to do my job.
There's one more step. There's one more step. You can, and if you like, you will become a Buddhist. But this not moving mind is the foundation, like this space in which objects appear. And then the next thing you do is Wei Wu Wei, or acting non-action, or moving not moving. I know this is a little paradoxical. So you can keep an unmoving mind, a non-dualistic clear foundation, while you are dealing with good and bad, moving, coming, going, etc. And once you have some meditation experience, you will attain and understand what it means. But just for the conventional rational thinking, it's paradoxical because it's not logical. Luckily, it's paradoxical and not logical. So that you could only experience it, the concepts only lead up to it, but it doesn't give you anything. It just leads you up to the threshold. And there's a great saying, if you want to enter the gate of Zen, do not give rise to thinking. There we are.
Okay. Where do you think you would be right now had you never met Soo Am Sunim?
This is a question I equally cannot answer like don't know, because I don't know. Because I have no idea where my life could have gone. I'm sorry, but I'm fortunate enough that it led me here, not somewhere else.
Soo Am Sunim became the first Korean Buddhist monk to propagate the wisdom of Buddhism in the West, and his teachings inspired countless foreigners.
이 스님이 문을 다 닫고 말이지 이 강당 승례들 참 흩어졌다고 해서 내가 사과해 와서 그러니까 아이고 그거는 괜찮습니다. 내가 그 비구니가 아니었더라면.
Soo Am Sunim was known as one of the 4 incarnations of Buddha in the world. His teachings are being passed on by his students worldwide.
I know that obviously you speak fluent English, and of course your native tongue is Hungarian, and you've had to learn Korean. It's not an easy language for a lot of people to acquire. How did you decide to learn Korean?
Well, anybody who says that Korean is not difficult really just doesn't have eyes and ears and thinking. Korean is a very complex language, and it's wonderful to learn it. First of all, when I got here, I had significantly more important jobs than studying language, but I realized that if I don't speak the language, basically I can't even be a housemaster because I can't do basic shopping down there at Suyushijang. So
at the market.
Exactly.
Right.
So, okay, learn basic Korean. I learned basic Korean in '95, Ilgup, level 1. Then I realized, this is not really enough, so let's do level 2. That came in '96. But then I got really busy, and I had temple jobs, and there were retreats, etc., etc. So I didn't go on. In retrospect, it was a mistake. I should have gone to level 3 and 4 and whatever, because now I'm studying level 3 as we speak. It's never too late, but Korean is a wonderful language, totally relationship sensitive, context-based.
Yes.
And for me, using these various endings and trying to relate to people in the correct way is like playing a symphony. A symphony,
That's a good way to describe it.
It's just what kind of instruments you use at that given moment, what kind of melody, what kind of composition. So that exactly expresses how close the person is, high and low or level, the importance of the matter, or the personal or impersonal endings. It's really fantastic to tune into that. It's a very good mental exercise because Koreans are very pali-pali, so you have to be spontaneous and fast, but you have to be appropriate at the same time. So you have about basically 6 to 10 choices every given word or every given verb
Right.
can have basically 6 to 10 endings in any given moment. It's your choice to use them.
And you now learn Buddhist writings and tests?
No, come on. I don't have 2.5 lifetimes for that. No. I'm not learning writings as per Chinese characters and stuff. But what I'm learning is Korean Buddhist terminology. And I'm not learning that from books. I have teachers I really respect, monks I look upon very highly. And of course, Soo Am Sunim's translations come first. And then I have other monks to enrich this vocab. I'm trying to learn this trade in Korean out of a sense of gratitude, also a sense of more direct relationship with Korean Buddhists. And needless to say, when you speak to Koreans in Korean, wow.
They respond very positively, don't they?
Very, very differently than through a translator.
Yes.
Translators are necessary, and I appreciate all my translators' jobs. But it's a firewall.
Yeah. As you speak Korean, that you really win a lot of people's hearts and minds, because it's not an easy language to learn, and the people who come to see you are probably really impressed by the fact that you're trying so hard to learn Korean.
Partially, yes, and of course some of them are less impressed than kind of expecting me to speak better, and that's also very good. Well, to be home in Korea, you have to eat rice, you have to eat kimchi, and you have to speak Korean. If you don't, you're not home here. And that's our spiritual home. So I really enjoy learning that, although I have a lot more to learn.
Now, when you've given talks, do people expect you to be speaking Korean, or do they expect you to be speaking English?
But there's more and more demand for it, although I'm far from ready. Or Koreans tell me directly, we know you speak Korean, talk to us in Korean. Of course I speak Korean at a bus stop, in a restaurant, or in the street, but this very Buddhist high-class Korean, it takes more time to learn, but I will.
Has there ever been any type of, shall I say, prejudice against you because they think that because you're of a Western origin that you are unable to grasp it quite as well as someone who's Korean?
You know, prejudiced people don't really come to my talk, so these two folks are really separate. Let's start with the prejudice. Prejudice is not bound to eye corner or skin color or social status, hair, no hair. Some people in the West also believe we just can't make it as Korean monks, and some people in Korea also believe that we can't make it as Korean monks. And I don't care about that too much as long as I do my job. So they really are interested in the white face and the big nose. But what they are more interested in is whether you know your homework. So they don't want you to be the biggest spanking Zen master on earth, because in fact we are not. But what we can do is use our own very good experience and our different angle at Korean Buddhism, which is not the traditional angle. We learn the tradition, we appreciate the tradition, we attain as much as possible from the tradition. But we are not Korean, we were not born here. So that gives us a fresh view, a fresh angle, a fresh approach, and that's something Koreans really appreciate. So it's very practical. What I'm getting as a review, because talks are everywhere, you can download them, you can watch them, rewatch them, whatever.
They're all over YouTube.
You know, when I get this, my grandmother changed her ironing habits. And I said, what does that have to do with my talks? Listen, she said, my mom and grandma, they used to watch television all the time and listen to the sound as radio. But your talks are with subtitles. So my grandma put down the iron and started to watch it so that she could read the subtitles. This never happened in 25 years.
Interesting.
So, and then they say, your talks are really practical. They are really easy to understand. It inspires people. So I really take it as not just as a credit, because it's not me. The whole teaching which I received, the whole practice which I got assistance with, that all comes together in these talks. It's not really one mouth, speaking. But what's really important for me is that our teacher, Soo Am Sunim, who lived, right in this house for a long time, he taught us, believe in yourself. But what the self is your job to clarify what you are. So that clears away prejudice, that doesn't let us run high on positive or negative feedback. And again, humbly express my appreciation to his teaching and this tradition, because without that, this hybrid wouldn't appear.
A lot of people search for happiness in external things, right? We search for happiness in our jobs or in families or that one relationship, you know, that soulmate that's going to give me the happiness.
If we accept happiness as a byproduct of our practice for something higher than happiness or unhappiness, it will come. But if we directly want to get it and we strive for this idea of happiness, it always leaves us.
Yes.
It always becomes transient. It somehow never works out. It becomes imperfect, you know, impermanent, dependent on something or someone else. And unless we realize that that's the way the world works, we'll always get disappointed and frustrated. And the West, especially the West, but now the East, also. That's why we have so many addicts. Because we're addicted to some idea of happiness, and if it doesn't work, we have layer 2 happiness, layer 3 happiness, then chemical happiness, then sensory happiness, then food happiness, etc., drug happiness, whatever. And all the time, all this, you know, struggling time, we don't notice that our fundamentals are not clear. The foundation is not strong. We don't understand ourselves. We don't understand the world. We don't understand our relationship. So how could we be happy in the wrong way?
Yeah.
But once you find the right way, the correct way, then naturally happiness appears as part of a larger balance. All right?
Today, if there's something that you could say made you happy, what would that be?
This interview.
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's been so fun talking with you, and I still have a few questions before
Go
we
ahead.
go.
No problem.
You've published a number of books. You've published The Flower and the Bee, The Mirror of One's Soul. What kind of message do you feel you're trying to give to people when they're reading your books or coming to your talks?
Just wake up. That's all, people. Wake up while you can. This life is extremely short. Wake up while you can. And take that with you to whatever comes next after you leave this body. Because if you just take your own karma, that's pretty gruesome.
We all want a life filled with happiness and pleasure rather than pain and suffering. And we often seek happiness by fulfilling our materialistic desires. But has that truly made us happy? Chong Am Sunim believes otherwise.
So what are some of your plans now, and when will you go back to Hungary?
This time I go back to Hungary on May 31st, and we'll do a 100-day Kido at Wangkwangsa.
Oh wow, so 100 days of prayer.
Yeah, a prayer, or I would say chanting practice, which transforms you. You know, it starts with worship, then it stops being worship. And that kind of Kido includes the Nungomju, the Shurangama mantra, which is one of the most important mantras in Mahayana Buddhism, and part of our Kapung, our tradition in Korea. And we include the Daebiju also, which is the mantra of great compassion, called the Great Dharani, and the various other chants. We do that for 100 days, and we will have several short retreats, short meditation retreats in the meantime. And then for the last week, we'll have a large Korean group visiting.
Wonderful.
I'm very much looking forward to that. I'll be back briefly in Korea in September, and hopefully for the winter retreat, which starts in the middle of November. So I expect to sit 3 months in one of the Zen halls in Korea, which is, I think, a very important and very deep experience. No matter how people feel about it before or after, what happens during that time is irreplaceable for any Sunim.
Last but not least, if you had to describe what Buddha's teachings meant to you and mean to you, how would you say?
Wake up and help this world. That's it. In short, nothing is more concise than that. Wake up, attain who you truly are, then attain your correct job, what you came here for when you were born, and use that to help this world.
Chong Am Sunim, it's been a pleasure to have you on my show, and thank you so much for inviting me to this amazing temple. And I'm so glad that you were here in Korea for us to do this interview. And you've made this interview truly an interview. So thank you so much.
Susan, thank you so much for having me, and I really appreciate your wonderful, intelligent questions and your insight into the interview.
Oh, well, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take care. Okay.